Okay, first of all,
when Mr. Obama gave his State of the Union address, he repeated one of the most pernicious and deceitful economic lies of the modern age when he said, "Today, women make up about half our workforce, but they still make 77 cents for every dollar a man earns. That is wrong, and in 2014, it's an embarrassment." No, Mr. Obama, who I voted for 6 years ago because I thought you would bring a shift towards reason and logic that had been sorely lacking in the wake of Bush 2, women do not make 77 cents to the dollar a man makes. This idea has been widely disproven, but let us dispense with it quickly. The source of the argument is to add up the collective income of men versus women in the country. Yes, by this standard, you will find that women, on the whole, make about 77% of what men make. Notice, however, that the mystics of muscle who proclaim this supposed iniquity are careful not to outright declare that when a man and a woman working at the same steel mill hear the closing bell, remove their protective gear, and head to the foreman for their daily bread, the male employee is handed $80 for his 8 hours of labor, while his female counterpart, shamefaced but stoically resolved, watches as $61.60 falls into her worn, calloused, and grease-stained hand. This is not the cause of the 77% statistic, and as much as Mr. Obama and his social justice warrior base would attempt to shame the opposition into silence by implying that dissenting voices are nothing more than privileged males who long for the glory days when men were free to sever a woman's arms and legs a la boxing Helena and use her vulnerable torso for absent-minded, beer-fueled gang rapes during Super Bowl Sunday, punctuated in the winter months by the most disturbing form of curling one could imagine, or whatever other dulcet slave girl-inspired terrors Andrea Dworkin was able to dream up. It never will be. The simple reality is that this disparity is the result of careers chosen by men and women. The libertarian-minded YouTube channel Learn Liberty has an excellent video on this topic, which is linked below, but I was also pleased to see that the Daily Beast, which had previously gone so far as to name Anita Sarkeesian one of 125 women of impact, reporting on this very issue, calling 77% the bogus statistic that won't die. I was further pleased to see that the article was written by a one Christina Hoff Sommers, author of Who Stole Feminism, which is arguably the first book any woman considering identifying as a feminist should read. The article, which is also in the link below, points out that the reason men on the whole earn more money than their female counterparts is that more men gravitate towards pursuing high-impact jobs and women do not. She points out that the top earning careers such as metallurgical engineering are dominated by men, while the bottom earning careers such as theater arts and early childhood education are dominated by women. This may indicate sexism in the ways in which boys and girls are guided into adulthood, but it does not indicate any sort of sexist prejudice within the market itself. I posted this article in a tweet directed at Gail Dines and others, and one of Comrade Dines' most frequent supporters, at least in terms of responding to me directly, was quick to fire back the suggestion that society inherently devalued these jobs because they were work done by women. This is confirmation bias at its finest. When the rational person puts forth a point and rather than presenting a counter-argument, one instead angles their perspectives in such a way that the original point confirms your existing stance. It's not so much moving the goalposts so much as saying, you know, if you stand on the other side, the ball is technically moving away from the goalposts. The poster's response, however, indicates the very disconnect with reality that allows for the maintaining of a contradiction. So long as one does not acknowledge the possible validity of any counter-arguments, the stage is set for a self-perpetuating cycle. Science fiction author and commentator Jerry Pournelle has what he refers to as Pournelle's Law, or the Iron Law of Bureaucracy, which, simply put, refers to the manner in which the interests of bureaucrats will inevitably replace the interest of the group the bureaucrats represent. For example, welfare states become self-perpetuating because the people tasked with overseeing the administration of the welfare state will realize that if they are truly successful in their jobs of lifting people out of poverty, they will ultimately be out of work and thus need to pursue courses of action that will maintain poverty rather than abolish it. The contradiction, therefore, that allows the mindset of the poster to continue is the refusal, willfully or not, to realize that the needs of the bureaucrat and the needs of the constituent are not one and the same, and that doing right by your base in such a way that you get reelected is not the same as solving the problem. Although I would disagree with him on the literal matter of medical companies keeping people sick for the sake of profit, I do agree with Chris Rock in the abstract sense when he says, "There ain't no money in the cure." In the 2012 election cycle, the Obama administration was on shaky ground. Vitriol from both the Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street had put the economy first and foremost in people's minds, and economic policy has never been a strong suit for Democrats who tend to fare better on social issues. But social issues weren't exactly forthcoming in the 2012 election, which saw Romney, who was more fluent in economic matters, though I would hasten to add still a horrible choice for president, to take a great deal of the spotlight. So what to do? Well, certainly misogyny, like a great many other forms of bigotry, is still a problem for the GOP with its adherence to outdated moral codes and the stammering inability to address minorities in a constructive manner. But they were on the back burner. The asshole social conservatives like Rick Santorum had fallen by the wayside, and Romney was, if not a shoo-in, at least a considerable threat to the Obama administration. Ultimately, however, Obama's winning play was to emphasize, in the extreme, Romney's undeniable weakness on social issues, weaknesses that Romney himself was barely able to keep under wraps with flubs like the infamous 47% of Americans comment. As a result, the administration was able to play up minority issues for the sake of political theater, not the least of which was this ruse known as the GOP's War on Women. MoveOn.org has an article outlining supposed examples of this war on women. Many of these are absurd to say the least. For example, the idea that cutting Head Start is an attack on women on the premise that women ought to be at home married with kids. Well, first of all, the personal motivation for cutting Head Start has no bearing on whether or not Head Start is an effective program, nor does getting preferential treatment indicate that you are being discriminated against. But the issue was tied into women based on comments by two Republican representatives who talked about the effectiveness of their wives staying home with the children. Neither one was making a literal declaration that Head Start should be cut because women ought to be at home with their kids. Their statements were simply spun that way. The only ones which could be considered valid are those that directly relate to restricting a woman's right to abortion, but even those are marred by the fact that what's really being debated is the matter of federal funding. Until Roe v. Wade is overturned, and that's the great threat of getting a Republican in the White House, abortion will be constitutionally legal. So when the left's propaganda machine declares that Republicans are pushing a bill that would result in women being allowed to die instead of receiving an abortion, it's important to read the fine print because sometimes, as in this case, you'll find that what they're actually referring to is a bill that would allow doctors receiving federal funding to refuse to perform abortions and still receive federal funding. Instead of using this as an opportunity to observe as proof that neither Democrats or Republicans have the high ground when it comes to cutting spending, instead adherents on the left internalize this as a plot on behalf of conservatives to let women die on the operating table. Similarly, MoveOn reports that a new law in South Dakota would allow for anti-abortion activists to kill abortion doctors, as it would justify homicide committed by a woman trying to stop immediate harm to her unborn child, and extends that right to anyone immediately connected to that woman, such as a spouse or a close family member. So, could that be interpreted to mean it's legal to kill abortion doctors? Well, sort of. If we were to set aside the fact that Phil Jensen, the representative behind the bill, spoke with Mother Jones and explained that the law specifically applies to persons committing illegal acts and abortion is legal, then we have to consider that the law would only allow vigilantes to kill doctors in the process of carrying out an abortion, meaning that to do so, someone would have to first commit the crime of trespassing on private property, then commit the crime of overpowering whatever police or security may be present at the scene, along with whoever else might be in the way, and even then they'd still only be able to kill the doctor if that doctor were in the process of committing the abortion. A doctor standing across the room making preparations is not a threat to the woman or the fetus, and killing a doctor who has just finished the abortion couldn't possibly save the unborn life. So the idea that this is in some way an underhanded attempt to open the floodgates for pro-life nuts to start killing abortion doctors is absurd, and all of the attention should be directed at the suspicious motives of the pro-life special interest groups championing the bill, not the politicians themselves. The problem with pursuing this angle, additionally, is that there are legitimate areas of concern in South Dakota's abortion laws which are unconstitutional, such as requiring a doctor to offer to show a woman a sonogram or forcing them to read a speech specifically designed to guilt the woman into changing her mind. These measures are unconstitutional, and some have, thankfully, already been recognized as such and struck down by the higher courts. It is this sort of absurd behavior The Onion satirized beautifully with their headline that Republican lawmakers now wanted to have women name the child and decorate a room in their homes before having the abortion. So why do I bring all this up? To demonstrate the manner in which the Iron Law of Bureaucracy applies not only to government officials but to propagandists and cause leaders as well, and also highlight the very propaganda machine that was used to swing the tide against Romney. The GOP is no doubt stuffy, pompous, incompetent, corrupt, and so far behind the times they can't put two sentences together without making themselves look like the clowns they are. But they have not declared war on women. If the war on terror, the war on drugs, and the war on porn are any indication, the GOP is quite happy to openly declare their wars on abstract concepts rather than have those declarations made on their behalf by the opposition. Sandra Fluke being blessed out by Rush Limbaugh was not an indicator of a war on women, just that Rush Limbaugh is an asshole, and his comments themselves, not his stance on the issue, reveals his own deeply ingrained misogyny. That didn't stop the Obama administration from using it for a series of photo ops, but the larger issue was the matter of whether or not employees should be required to pay for contraceptives under federally mandated insurance coverage. This was not in any way, shape, or form a debate over whether women should or should not have the right to an abortion or to birth control, but rather than frame it honestly as a question of whether or not it is morally right to have taxpayers pay for one another's medical expenses, especially those that they don't agree with, it was instead reframed with nothing but propaganda and rhetoric as a war on women that led the befuddled male leaders of the GOP to inevitably put their foot in their mouth. Again, I'm not suggesting that there aren't really threats to women's rights and real threats to reproductive control. A great deal of my own advocacy on sexual freedom has been devoted to those actual issues. See my video, Terry England, Your Friendly Neighborhood Dipshit, for a good example of this. What I'm pointing out, however, is how politicians will manipulate real legitimate issues, societal on the left, economic on the right, to gain and maintain power by creating problems where none existed. The very process by which the Iron Law of Bureaucracy flourishes. Not all politicians and special interest lobbyists will do this, but enough will for the system to become self-perpetuating. As Orwell himself so accurately put it, the war is not meant to be won. The war is meant to be continuous. So how does this play into the president's usage of the bogus 77% claim? Well, for that, we need to examine Comrade Dines on several levels. For example, you may recall that I uploaded 2 videos on the passing of Gail's former protege, Beth. This created no small amount of controversy from Gail's cronies, and the reigning protege, Dana Bialer, even took to castigating me directly. What will no doubt surprise most listeners is to learn that Gail herself contacted me directly on the matter, sending an email to the Eros Empire Facebook page. It read, This is a private message to you, but I know I have no power over what you do with this. I am asking you to do the right thing for Amy Beth's mother and take down the video. The very worst thing that could happen in the world has happened to this woman. Please don't make her family members suffer any more than they already are. The Amy Beth I knew was a devoted daughter and tried to do the best she could by her parents. She would not want this for her mother. Gail Dines. Wanting to tread carefully, I sent the following response. Gail, thank you for your polite, considerate, and even-handed message. I do appreciate it. Please understand that despite my scathing tone and flair for controversy, this is not a matter I am taking lightly or without ongoing cogitation. I corresponded with Sherry a few days ago when she reached out to me, and I expressed a certain amount of this to her. In all honesty, I am between two worlds on the matter. On the one hand, I have no desire to cause Beth's family additional heartache. On the other hand, I knew Beth to be someone who felt tremendously betrayed by you and those close to you, and challenging your advocacy was something that was extremely important to her. As I searched within myself for which hand holds the moral high ground, I will respectfully say this. The decent human side of me truly wants to believe that you have contacted me in good faith. Nevertheless, after years of cold dismissals and snide put-downs from you, coupled with hateful, disturbing remarks from SPC members, I am frankly skeptical of your underlying intentions here. I welcome any further correspondence, and so long as it is reasonably respectful, I will certainly respond in kind. Regards, Jordan. Some time passed, and I didn't hear back from Gail, but I did make a decision, and so I sent her another letter. Gail, I don't know if you received or read the response I sent you from my Eros Empire page. It should still be available if you wish to read it. Nevertheless, I have decided to send this ultimate response to you on the matter directly. I had considered saying this on YouTube, but decided it might resonate more with you if I delivered it privately. I have decided that I will not take down the videos I made regarding Beth's passing and the livid response from Dana. My heart goes out to Beth's mother and her family, but just as it was Beth's life, not her mother's, so it is Beth's death as well. Taking the video down will not bring Amy Beth back, nor will it alter the facts about the latter part of her life, that she was a prostitute and aspiring porn actress with a deep-seated resentment for you, your organization, and its tactics and principles. I did think long and hard about what my ultimate decision on this matter would be while I prepared my video on your Counterpunch article regarding AHF, Cameron Bay and Company, and was struck time and again at how many of the facts you got wrong. Time and again, this has been a pattern with you to such a degree that I cannot believe you are innocent in your errors. Whether you are consciously deceitful or deluded by confirmation bias is unclear, but what is clear to me is that you will not represent the facts correctly if they do not suit your agenda. Contrary to what you and your associates might think, I am not some mindless anarchist with the sexual palate of Caligula. I do have a very real and deeply ingrained sense of right and wrong, and central to that is the belief that morality can only proceed from that which is true. As such, I find it frankly preposterous that you would presume to lecture me on doing the right thing, even with regards to Amy Beth's mother. The Amy Beth I knew sent me, in addition to a multitude of insight on her experiences working with you, an ongoing series of photos and videos of herself masturbating or performing sex acts on various partners, along with lascivious notes about wanting to do the same to me. These were interspersed, however, with randomly angry tirades over various misgivings she had regarding my libertarian politics and economics. She was a chaotic individual, and to say that she was unstable is a profound understatement. It is documented well outside of my personal experience that this was an integral part of who Amy Beth was. Her personal blog, FetLife account, and interviews reflect these developments in her life, and while purging them from the internet might assuage her mother's pain, it will not ultimately serve the truth, and for that reason, it will not serve what is morally right. You are a person of second-hand morality, Gail. Beth's mother contacted me asking to have the video taken down, and only then did you see fit to reach out to me on her behalf. Your morality is predicated on attaching your agenda to the needs and interests of others in such a way that you appear to be acting on their behalf. You did that with Beth's mother, just as Michael Weinstein attaches his agenda to the needs of AIDS patients. It is not morality, but a craven mockery of morality. I will not compromise my standards to accommodate it. I won't be writing to you again unless you desire further correspondence. Regards, Jordan. I let the issue pass from there and moved on to other matters. Still, when I posted my open letter to Clara Benethan, warning her about getting involved with Gail and radical feminism in general, Gail saw fit to publish this tweet in response. The same Jordan Owen who exploits tragic suicide of a troubled young woman to self-promote as an author. Pathetic. Well, actually, no, Gail, I did not do that. In fact, I made it a point not to mention my writing or my music or any of my other endeavors when I discussed Beth's passing, and I did not monetize the obituary video. The viewer could easily have watched both of those videos knowing nothing about me and come away not knowing that I was an author at all. That was done intentionally and with very good reason, so that Gail and company could not assume that I was doing those commentaries to self-promote. Nevertheless, through the power of lying, Gail simply declares this anyway. But do you see what she did? She created the very problem she wanted to accuse me of. I cannot answer her on this matter without taking the fact that I'm a published author into account. Just as shutting down adult industry medical left the porn industry vulnerable to the very problems Gail and company had claimed existed all along, Gail has here created the problem she wants to accuse me of instigating. It is a vile, contemptible, craven, underhanded form of manipulation and intellectual dishonesty that, sadly, is par for the course with Gail. Gail works to create the very problem she wishes to attack. It is a step beyond the straw man fallacy, which consists of taking an oversimplified perspective and attacking that instead of the actual issues, such as MoveOn's assertion that allowing doctors to refuse abortion and receive federal funding would actually mean women being left to die. This is instead a straw issue altogether, a flat-out lie made to appear legitimate by the actions of the accuser, not the accused. With that in mind, let us explain the source of the never-ending fallacy that is the wage gap myth. As discussed previously, the apparent difference is the result of adding up all the wages of all men and all women, not a one-to-one comparison of men and women working the same jobs, doing the same work with the same education and work experience backgrounds. As Learn Liberty points out, when one controls for all of those factors, the wage gap closes to 98% to the dollar. In other words, 100% with a 2% margin of error. The cause, however, of the 77% myth that the feminists fight against is the direct result of feminists like Gail Dines. Gail is a high-ranking and influential figure at Wheelock College, which is a social work school and dedicated to producing students who will go into areas like early childhood education, social work, counseling, human services, etc., the very careers that rank at the bottom in terms of earnings and the fields that are already dominated by women. No, this is not because society values men's work over woman's work or whatever straw man you might wish to suggest. It is because, whether you like it or not, those jobs are more vital to the continued functioning of society. Stop and think about all the ways in which you use steel every day in the buildings you inhabit, in your cooking utensils, in your transportation, and countless other facets of your everyday life. If your life was deprived of steel for even one day, it would be thrown into a level of chaos you cannot imagine. Now ask yourself how much a steel magnate would suffer if your profession dropped off the planet. Therein lies the answer as to why he makes more money. Oh, sure, you could argue that early childhood education is vital to the interests of society for raising the next generation, but what you cannot argue is that the skill set required of a quality metallurgist is much higher and much rarer than that of the person who taught that metallurgist basic math and reading in the first grade. But time and again, year after year, Gail and her employer funnel one young woman after another into the very careers that keep the wage gap from closing. So long as women are set up to dominate in these lower paid career fields, they will continue on the whole to earn 77% of what on the whole men make. Gail and her kind are the ones who cause, perpetuate, and solidify the very problem they purport to fight against, just as in the Amy Beth case and just as in the 77% myth. If you are a young woman contemplating what to study in your college years and the wage gap is something you wish to help close, don't go into women's studies or early childhood education or social work or any of the other careers that have long been deemed women's work yet are hypocritically taught to young women by bull bullheaded social justice warriors like Gail Dines. Instead, go into petroleum engineering, go into aerospace engineering, go into metallurgy, aim high in the business world, the very thing that Gail rails against. Yes, you may encounter some form of misogyny along the way, but if you buy into the rancid stereotype that business tycoons are nothing more than madmen-inspired ass pinchers, you may end up depriving yourself of the opportunity that would have led you to making actual progress for women's overall standing in the world. In her debate with Anna Aerosmith, Gail commented, as she has elsewhere, that as an empowered woman, she has a duty to help other women. But what she never explains is why. What edict makes it so? As Arthur Desmond pointed out, only slaves are born into contracts. As Ayn Rand pointed out, you are not a bandage for the wounds of others, nor are you a sacrifice on their altars. And, as has been said by many, the best way to help the poor is to not be one of them.